Happy Tuesday. We are finishing our book. Do a happy dance, please, because I am happy. We have only 2 more pages of this chapter and then 1 more chapter to go. So excited to finish, and I can't wait to see what's happening. We've already had some crazy turn of events, and the big weapon, what I think was kind of a machine gun, backfired and ended up doing a really good job at bringing everyone together from the Sparks and from Ember. So quite interesting. And now they're kind of on each other's sides, especially Mary and Ben Barlow, who got kind of hurt. So let's see. Dune's father mentioned politely that the hotel residents would have to... Let me try that one more time. Dune's father mentioned politely that the hotel residents would have to have decent houses sooner than later. Mary said that they would start building some of them now, out behind the meadow. The best of the Sparks builders would be in charge, and they would teach the Emberites construction. The houses will be small, Mary said, and we'll be able to only build a few before the rain comes. Most of you will have to spend the winter in the hotel. Clary stood to announce that her garden was producing well. In addition to cucumbers, melons, and peppers, she had grown nearly 100 butternut squashes, which would keep them through the winter. That would help a little. The villagers looked at her curiously. Butternut squash? They had never heard of them. I grew them from seeds I brought from Ember, Clary said. I brought all the seeds I had, all kinds. Next year I'll be able to grow more. Mrs. Murdo said that she had learned a great deal in her time with the doctor. She would like to be an assistant doctor. It's clear that this community needs more than one, she said. I know something about plants, said Maddie, speaking up for the first time. I wish to be an assistant hotel gardener with Clary Lane. Edward Pocket said that he demanded to be made official librarian. Mary looked surprised. We don't have a librarian, she said. Exactly right, said Edward. You have a disorderly heap of books. I've made a great progress with them, however. I invite you to come by and see. Ben Barlow kept muttering dire warnings about crop failures and vitamin deficiencies and epidemics, but Mary said that they would help cope with those problems when and if they occurred. Little by little, people began to feel interested in how this new arrangement was going to work. There were endless questions. What if there were arguments? How would they be settled? What if the Emberites go back to eating with their lunchtime families? Would they get enough for dinner, for breakfast? What would happen when they needed things other than food, like shoes or soap or hats? The trouble is, said Mrs. Polster, we don't have anything. We can't trade for goods at the market because we don't have anything that you want. But Dune saw the solution right away. We do, he said. Mrs. Polster raised his eyes at him. She wasn't used to being contradicted. We have one thing that you need, said Dune. Matches. We still have a lot left. We could use them to trade with, at least for a while. 2 matches for a pair of shoes, say. People laughed and clapped. It was perfect. Ben said in his opinion, a pair of shoes was worth at least 5 matches. But no one paid much attention. All of this has to be worked out, said Mary. It was going to involve disagreement. It was going to involve hardship. But we have endured hardship before, she said. We can do it again. Wilmer sighed. It's just that we hoped we wouldn't have to, she said. Mary shot him a stern look. We can do it again, she repeated. And we will. Last chapter, 29. 3 amazing visits. Leanna gave up on trying to persuade Mrs. Murdo to move to the hotel, since they'd have their own house sooner or later. They might as well stay at the doctor's house until then. Besides, Mrs. Murdo was so intent on learning to be an assistant doctor that it seemed unkind to take her away from that. Lena and Maddie took on jobs of harvesting and preserving the produce from the doctor's vegetable garden. Every morning they picked baskets of tomatoes and beans and peppers and corns and squash. Every afternoon they'd slice tomatoes and lay them in the sun to dry. They took dried beans out of their pods and put them in jars. They cooked peppers and packed them in olive oil. They tied bunches of herbs with strings and hung them to dry. Poppy puttered around on their feet, helping by sprinkling dry leaves here and there, or banging spoons on pots making music for them. Even Torin, whose feet were healing from the fire, I think he was burned, often chose to hang around with Lena and Maddie. He said that he knew how to make a garlic braid, so they gave him a basket of garlic and he made one. One afternoon, as she and Maddie were cutting green beans for dinner, Lena heard wheels crunching on the road outside. The next moment, she heard whuffling of ox. Then Torin sprung up and leapt as fast as he can to the front of the house. Uh-oh, thought Lena. Is it who I think it is? Who do we predict? I think it's Casper. Yikes. It was. There was Casper's battered truck, and there was Casper climbing out of it. He looked grubby. His mustache drooped. Torin ran towards him, crying, "Casper, Casper!" And Casper smiled in a tired way. "Hey, brother," he said. He thumped Torin's back a couple of times. Then he started towards the house. Lena and Maddie went outside to meet him. When he saw them, he stopped and glared. "Deserters," he said. But he didn't seem to have the energy to berate them further. He trudged into the house and plunked down on the couch. Torin plucked beside him. I have been waiting and waiting for you," Torin said. "Why didn't you come back with them?" He flicked his hands towards Lena and Maddie. "I had important work to do," said Casper, which they did not want to help with. "And what happened with your work?" asked Maddie, standing by the door. "Did you find what you wanted to find?" Casper didn't even look at her. His mouth closed and his eyes began to slump into the back of the couch. "My numbers," he said, "need readjusting. They were completely right except for one thing." "What thing was that?" "Wrong city," said Casper, without opening his eyes. "I reworked the numbers. Tomorrow I will be heading north." Maddie and Lena exchanged a look. Casper turned his head towards Maddie and squinted at her. "I don't suppose you want to come?" "No, thank you," said Maddie. "I plan to stay here where something with real potential is beginning." Torin tugged on Casper's arm. "Did you bring me something this time?" Casper opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling for a while. "Well, yes," he said, "I did." "What?" shrieked Torin. "What is it? Can I have it now?" "It's out in the truck," said Casper. "I found a whole crate of them. Very unusual." "You can have one." "One what? Let's go get it." Torin darted towards the door. Casper heaved himself up and they went outside. Lena watched as Casper rooted around in one of his crates. He came up with something she recognized with a start. She hadn't seen one of these for a long time. It was like seeing something that belonged to an old friend that was now dead. "What is it?" asked Torin. "A light bulb," said Casper. "I found a case of 48 of them, all unused." "But what does it do?" Torin asked, peering into the light bulb as if expecting to see something alive in there. He tapped the glass with his fingernail. "It gives light," said Casper, "if you have electricity." "But we don't have electricity." "That's right," Casper said wearily. "So you hold on to it in case someday we do." Torin went to the window seat and sat there, turning the light bulb around and around in his hand. Lena watched him, thinking about Ember. People had figured out how to use it once, she thought. They could figure it out again. A few days after Casper left, there was another visitor to the doctor's house. Lena was out in the courtyard at time, cracking walnuts with rocks, and she saw someone approaching at the gate. A bent figure walking slowly, somehow crookedly. She stood up. The person seemed to have trouble with the gate latch, so she went to help. And that was when she realized it was Ben Barlow. His injured arm was bandaged and strapped to his side, and the jacket he wore was draped over it with his sleeve hanging empty. That was why he looked lopsided. "Good afternoon," said Ben. "I wonder if Torin is here." He is, said Lena. I'll get him. She found Torin out in the back of the house, sitting under a tree, eating a hunk of bread. Your uncle has come to see you. Torin stared at her. My uncle? He sounded both excited and scared. He jumped up, shoving his bread into his pocket. When Ben saw Torin coming towards him, he frowned. Then, as if catching himself, he changed his expression to a smile. Hello, nephew, he said. How are you getting on? Torin looked wary. Fine, he said. Good, said Ben. He stroked his beard. Lena wondered if that was all he had to say. Torin filled the silence. Is your arm still attached to your body? He said. Yes, said Ben, but just barely. He started to frown into the air again, and then thought better of it. He sat down on the bench. Well, he said, I thought I'd just come and see you. Haven't seen you for a while. Years, said Torin. Well, yes, busy life, you know. Being a town leader, many decisions to make, matter of right and wrong to grapple with. Oh, said Torin. Lena could tell that he was thinking the same thing she was. Why has he come, then? Sometimes one makes the right decision, he said, and sometimes not. I'm predicting that he's going to apologize. I guess so, said Torin. Ben readjusted his bandaged arm. Lena saw that his beard was not as neatly trimmed as usual. Probably had a hard time doing it with his left hand. She was pretty sure that Ben didn't have a wife. She'd never heard of one for him. Well, said Ben, you were fortunate, weren't you, getting pulled out of the tree? Yes, said Torin. I am forced to acknowledge, said Ben, that it was my fault. The fire. I guess so, said Torin. An accident, said Ben. But one that did not have to happen. One that was my fault. Said Torin indifferently. Ben got to his feet with painful slowness. So, he said, enjoyable talking with you. No doubt we should get to know each other more. You must come by for a visit sometime, though of course I'm rarely at home. You're very busy, said Torin. That's right, said Ben, and he made his way towards the gate with a limping step. As he went out, he waved over his shoulder with his good hand, but he didn't turn around. Slowly, he started back towards the village. I think that was an apology, Lena said to Torin when he was gone. He's sorry for doing what he did. I guess he's sorry for not being a good uncle, too. For not taking you to live with him and for watching out for you. Live with him, said Torin, and he made a horrible face. Well, I thought you weren't happy living with Dr. Hessler, Lena said. You never seem very happy. I am too happy, said Torin crossly. He sat down on the bench that Ben had just left and pulled a hunk of bread from his pocket. A few little birds were hopping nearby. Absently, Torin tossed them some crumbs. He seemed to be thinking, I do like it here, trying to convince himself. And he looked up at her with his eyes all round, as if he had just discovered this for himself. Maybe he did like it. The next day, Dune came to the door of the doctor's house, carrying a sack. Kenny was with him, standing slightly behind Dune and peering curiously past him into the room. I have to show you this, Dune said to Lena. I made it with the present you brought me. He's kind of a genius, Kenny said. He's already showed me. We already know that. Dune set the sack on the window seat. It was only just after dinner time, but the days were shorter now, and the sun was nearly down. Dr. Hessler had already lit 2 candles. She and Mrs. Murdo and Maddie were sitting at the table, shelling lima beans. Poppy was sitting with them, tearing the bean pods into little pieces. All 4 came over to see what Dune had brought. Torin came too. He was actually more interested in showing Dune what he had than in seeing what was in the sack. I got a present from Casper, he said. Great, said Dune. But he wasn't really listening. Lena could see how excited he was about whatever he had in the sack. His eyes shone in the candlelight, and his hands fidgeting impatiently with the string around the sack. When he got it untied, he reached into the sack and brought out a small device made of wood and metal and some sort of machine, Lena thought. It had a coil of wire, and inside the coil she saw a magnet she had given Dune. There was a handle that looked as if it would make something turn. Lena, not being much interested in machines, was a little disappointed. It was clear that Torin was disappointed too. "Want to see my present from Casper?" he asked. "In a minute," said Dune. "Let me show you this first." "What does it do?" asked Lena. "It's some kind of can opener," asked Mrs. Murdo. "Or maybe it's sort of a mixer," said the doctor. "Or a drill," said Maddie. "Nope," said Dune happily. And Kenny, his face shining with the shared secrets, whispered, "Nope," too. "You won't believe it," Dune went on, "but it makes electricity. I found the directions for it in a book called Science Projects, but I couldn't try it out before because it didn't have a magnet." Ooh. "I didn't even know what a magnet was. But then you brought me one, Lena, and just the other day I remembered about the project." He looked at the magnet over the table and set it down. He took the magnet over the table and set it down. "What you do is you turn the crank, and that turns the magnet, and that generates electricity to run down these wires. It's supposed to be enough to light a light bulb. The trouble is I can't test it because I couldn't find any light bulbs that weren't broken." Torin jumped up and down. He pounded on Dune's arm. "My present from Casper! My present from Casper!" he yelled, and he bolted into the medicine room. "What's the matter with?" said Dune, but Lena broke in. "Dune," she said, "his present from Casper was a light bulb. Unbroken and unused." Torin came out of the medicine room carrying the light bulb, encased in both hands, walking fast now. Fast, but his stiff legs being extremely careful. "You won't break it, will you?" he said to Dune. "Your experiment won't blow it up, right?" Dune gazed at the light bulb as if it was the most wonderful thing he'd ever seen. Gingerly, he reached for it. "I'll be very, very careful. You can help me, Torin. Hold the light bulb right here." He showed Torin where to put the light bulb, and he wound 2 loose wires around the metal end. "Now," he said, "blow out the candles." Lena blew them out. The room went dark. Dune began turning the crank on his machine. At first, nothing happened except that the magnet turned around. Dune cranked faster and faster, and the glimmer appeared in the light bulb. First a glimmer, and then a glow, and then the light bulb shone with a faint and steady white light. Lena shrieked with happiness. Poppy shrieked too, because Lena had, and both the doctor and Mrs. Murdo gasped and broke into applause. Yay! Kenny beamed, glancing between the light bulb and Dune's face. Torin was being too careful to make a noise, but his eyes grew wide and his mouth dropped open. For almost 3 minutes, until his hand got tired, Dune cranked and cranked and cranked the machine around and around. The doctor wagged her hand in wonder. Mrs. Murdo turned her face away to hide tears, and Torin held on tight to the light bulb, even though it was getting very warm. Lena gazed at the light shining on everyone's face, full to the brim with hope, love, and joy. She watched the light bulb shining like a promise in the night. The end. And that's where we finished. Let's see. Yeah, there's nothing else. We have finished the book. Please send me an email. What did you think? How did you like the ending? Was the war scene what you wanted, what you expected? I didn't think they weren't going to end up staying. So what is your prediction? And tell me what you're excited about Matilda. I can't wait to start that one. All right, I can't wait to see you tomorrow on Zoom and see all your faces and get to talk to you because I miss you very much. So keep up the great work. Mwah.